Hi guys, welcome to Chakra Sessions. I'm your host, Polly Jo LeBay, here with Star Nations Radio Network, broadcasting through Be Live TV and the beautiful land of Facebook. So welcome. Today is a beautiful day for us to journey into ourselves. And here at Chakra Sessions, the kind of point of our show is for us to learn more about our energy system and how it impacts our life and what's going on for us. And it allows us through this knowledge to start shifting, changing, and course correcting our life in ways so that it's more aligned with who we want to be and who we are. So welcome. Good morning, Christine. Glad to see you so early in the house. I am all sorts of discombobulated in terms of energy because I spent the weekend at Star Nations Academy teaching with the amazing Neshi this beautiful transformational weekend for some women who were brave enough to join us. And spirit guides me in particular ways. The divine sets up healing for all of us, myself included. So yesterday was a day of travel to get back here. So today is sort of my first day at home sitting in my energy that's shifted since I left because of the work that we did. So cool to have you guys here in this kind of new vibration. So of course, Neshi's in the house. So she's going to remind us to like or love and share the broadcast so we can get it out there to more people. Because today we're talking all about how to expand your connection to the divine. And however that is that you perceive that, we always can go deeper. We can always have room for improvement. And a way for us to get even more in touch with who we are and how to get in touch with the flow that everybody talks about. Julie, glad to have you in the house. It was so nice to meet you in person this weekend. And I just want to say a moment of gratitude to you for all that you do to manage the academy and all the stuff that you take care of, which I am truly thankful for. Because technology is something that's difficult for me. When I'm in the depths of my work, my logic brain is kind of on a timeout and I'm spending my time in the flow and in my channel energy. So thank you for being there and helping, assisting, and doing all sorts of things, including your own work. When my team gives me the topic for the show, they pretty much give me the topic and then they don't let me think about it. I forget about it. I often check in the morning of to see, okay, what are we tapping into today? Okay, team, what are we tapping into? So, maybe if I paid attention to what the topic was today about opening the communication with the divine, I would have been prepared for my own energy shifting over the weekend to do even more of that. So it would be right in the front of my energy system and ready to go and ready to do things. Oh, thank you, Bobby. Glad to see you here. So much gratitude. That's what I woke up with so much gratitude. Gratitude for this being the work that the divine has me doing, and gratitude for the people who allow me to be in service for them. So here we are, you and I. And believe it or not, the divine is sitting right in the room with us. And, sometimes that can be a big, scary thought. And I went back in my memory to when the books Conversations with God, which are automatic writing channeled messages. When those books were released, and I'm sure Julie or Aneshi can type in, or somebody can type in, I think it's Neil Donald Walsh, but it might be the other way around. Like I said, my thinking brain is not on. When those first came out, though, it was this huge leap of faith for him to share the fact that when he was writing, he was asking questions and he was getting responses. And, you know, that did not align with some people's version of the divine, which is completely fine. But for other people, it was a sigh of relief that there are ways that we can communicate that maybe we weren't sure of or hadn't tried. So, you know, this is about, you know, ways you can do that. And we're going to start with the channeled writing, because there are a lot of creative, artistic people who talk about automatic writing all the time. And what that means, or what that kind of looks like for most people, is that when you just allow thoughts to flow without thinking about them. And many times you need to first do what I call a brain dump. And in the brain dump, you know, you write down anything that you've been thinking about. And as you dump more of that onto paper, because when it's on paper, right, it's becomes grounded, because now it's connected to a material that was a tree, right? And that tree had these wonderful roots and it holds space. So there's times, and you know, where when you write it down on a piece of paper, it anchors it really deeply for you. Now, I know other people who can do this electronically through their computer. For me personally, because of my energy system, I'm very sensitive to electronics and the vibration they're handing back to me. And so it's harder for me to get to filter the electronic piece out to hear the divine. So between me and a pen, there's very, you know, so if I'm holding a pen, there's very little caught in between. There's just like the metal and the ink or plastic or whatever's around it. So from the divine's energy to talk to me, it's only this little piece, where through a computer, it's going through, you know, hard drives and all these other things. So for me personally, it's not as easy. But some of you can tune out your brain because you do so much computer work that it could write through you really easily, right? So with automatic writing, you want to start, like I said, dumping the brain of all the nonsense. Some people are super at being able to just do a quick grounding meditation to quiet and then be able to write. Other times, we've got so many things going on, we kind of just need to get them out. Just like when you have a bunch of things to do and you're trying to hold it all in your head, it's hard to concentrate on what you're trying to get done. And it's so much easier to make a to-do list, right? Or to make a grocery list. You know, if you had to remember everything in your refrigerator and everything in your cupboards, you know, maybe you can. But having it on a list takes that portion that you were using to hold all that information and frees it up for other stuff to come in. Frees it up for the divine energy to come in and the divine energy to flow. Look at all these lovely ladies in the house. Hi, Rochelle. Nice to have you, sweetness. And Pat. Hi. Nice to see you. So get some of the busy task stuff onto paper, or, you know, maybe you have I have notes, you know, on my phone, this place where I can put lists when I'm out and about. And I don't mind using it for that, but it also gets it out of my brain, right? So that you're making room for the divine to flow through. And it's not that it's not already flowing through. It's just you're trying to hear it through all these other thoughts, if that makes sense. So we're kind of removing the gunk. We're putting on a screen with wider openings, maybe. So for automatic writing, there are a couple ways to do it. Like I said, I always begin with some sort of either grounding meditation or brain dump, depending on where I'm at. And people will find that this, some people are more connected first thing in the morning, and some people are more connected at the end of the day. And usually it's when we are closest to that in-between state of being awake and falling asleep. Because then we're not, invested in what's going on around us, or the time clock, or that type of thing. Nice. Hi, Jackie and Gina. But I love this. Nancy, I just had this conversation with my daughter as a tool to relieve anxiety too. Yes, it does relieve anxiety, because in that state, when we're anxious, we're either caught in the future or we're caught in the past. And sometimes, depending on the intensity, we're in both. So imagine being stretched out like a rubber band. You don't have any more room to stretch, right? So by taking the stuff that's stretching you out, you get to kind of come back, and then you have a little more flexibility. And Julie says, I always handwrite my poetry and journal entries because to me, words flow. If I use the computer, my brain's thinking letters, not words, and it stalls. Yes, thank you for saying it that way. That was perfect. I'm thinking in letters too, rather than in the energy. So when I do my channeled articles and for Star Nations magazine, it's down onto paper first. And then I'm retyping it. Once or twice, it came actually through straight onto the computer. And maybe because it would have been daunting to me to see how many pages it took up in my booklet. But generally, yes, when I'm typing, I'm thinking in letters. And so my mathematical brain is on. But when I'm writing, it's flowing through. So when you do automatic writing, and you've dumped all the gunk out, you have to give your inner critic a timeout. Your inner critic is that part of you that's going to go, well, that doesn't work. And, how do I know that's true? And what if that's what, put a muzzle on them, whatever you have to do. Just let whatever needs to flow out. If after you write it, I usually leave my writing for a little while, and then I go back and reread it. And unless it's totally as it's flowing, it's resonating, because at this point, stuff flows through and I'm getting it as it's going through. I'm not questioning it. But when I had times where the question was really intense, and I was worried about the outcome, I had anxiety about it, I let the answer come out, and then I leave it and I go back to it. So it's kind of like when you have a tough conversation with a friend, right? You sometimes need a timeout to go process what was said, so that you can really get into a heart-centered place about it, and then you return to it. So like I said, you can ask a question and then wait for an answer, or you can just allow whatever stream of thought wants to come through down onto the paper. That's what it means by automatic writing, because our brain, our logic brain, isn't thinking of the right way to spell it or the right grammar, punctuation, capitalization, whatever. It doesn't worry about that. It doesn't think about that. It's just allowing the words to flow like a conversation. Right now, this conversation is flowing. You know, those of us who are hearing it, we're not worried about where the commas and the periods are, whether I'm making a capital letter, was that underlined? We don't think about that in conversation. We just absorb the content. And so that's what happens when you're having a conversation through automatic writing. It's just in flow, and we can, but there's no need to worry about grammar, if that makes sense, because it's the message, not the logic. We have editors for that, right? So that's one way that you can contact the divine. Now, some people are going to say it's your higher self that writes through you. If that's what you believe, then that's what writes through. If you believe it's your guides talking to you, then it's your guides talking to you. And if you believe it's Mother Mary, it's Mother Mary, because only you know what energy is coming through. And if you believe it's God or creator or goddess, or your belief is true, you don't need to validate to anybody what that conversation is about. And so that was the big leap of faith that he took when he did the books, Conversations of God, because it went from a personal to a public conversation. And we know when people are part of a public conversation, we don't all hear the same thing the same way, and people take things out of context and they get triggered. So there's this defensive energy that can happen. And I'm not saying that, this is the book of creation or anything like that. This was his personal experience, and he was sharing it with us, and was making it clear that we all can have this conversation. And so automatic writing is one of the easiest ways to start that connective flow between you and the divine, because we all know how to have a conversation. We've been doing it before we could even talk, right? So let me just check in. So Pat says that she handwrites too. Bobby says, write with the computer, drawn to the pencil first. For her, it's still the best flow and faithful energy. Hi, Vicky. Glad you made it. Oh, yeah. And so Neshi has got my stuff up and running. So I'll talk about that after. So we now have, we have a tool, right? We have this tool of connection that we can use. We can connect with automatic writing. And it's just the inner critic that needs the muzzle, so that you're not second guessing, you're not doubting, you're just allowing. And, when we tell children to draw a picture, they don't usually, depending on the age, right? They don't worry about it. They're not like, well, what do you want me to draw? Do you want a tree? Do you want to, it's like, well, just draw whatever you want. They don't usually get into an anxious place about, you hand them some crayons, you hand them a paper and say, either draw me a picture or draw a picture, whatever you want. They'll doodle or do whatever they want. They don't analyze, and they're not worried about the rightness of it. And that's what we need to remember, because our inner child is the one who is in that pure-hearted space, who's in constant connection with the divine. And can be scary for our inner child to live in this disconnected vessel that surrounds her. And, she can connect to the divine, but she's not being heard, right? So the other thing that can help you connect with the divine, another thing, is to do something that's creative. I know we've got a poet in the house. I know we've got a couple artists in the house. I mean, Nancy makes magical tools that are just breathtaking. And I know she talks to each and every piece that she puts together. She hears the spirit in the stick. She hears the spirit in the shell. She hears the spirit in the earth or the flower that she's using. And for you artists, it's like the canvas talks to you or the paint talks to you, and it's like, it's divine energy. And however you connect to that, whether it's, you have a particular spirit guide who helps you with this and they're the one talking, I'm not going to get caught up on vernacular around the divine, because that's a whole more than one session on just, how's divine, what's divine, everybody's got their own interpretation. So I'm open to whatever your interpretation is. So doing something creative or artistic, it opens our floodgates. And when we open those floodgates and the inspiration strikes, we've all had moments of inspiration, right? Well, that it's an inside of our body connection to the divine. So it's that inside spark. So as the flow comes in, it sparks our divine spark, like, yes, there you are. Like it's lighting a candle, or it's like where it has that first when you strike the match and put it in. So that's the flow. It's when the divine energy hits our inner light and creates a spark, like electricity. And so that can happen when we're doing things that are creative. And it doesn't have to be, if you're not an artist, if you're not a painter, you might be a gardener, you might be a baker, whatever your way, you may put fabulous outfits together, and you also may be just a magician with a spreadsheet. Whatever allows you to kind of get out of your head and just be for a few minutes, will allow space for communication to come in. So we all know, we can ponder things. If we have a question that's going on and we're thinking it, we know the difference between mulling it over, which is kind of like letting whatever answers flow through come to you. And you hear them and you see if it resonates, and then you release them. Then there's when you're thinking about it. I'll think about it. When you think about it, you are analyzing it and you're taking it apart. You're not letting it move. You are, sort of dissecting it, seeing all the pieces parts. Not that doesn't work, because then you use the energy to then put it back together. But when you just allow the energy to come through, you're doing dishes and you're thinking about, you're in this automatic thing. You're kind of washing and rinsing, and maybe you're loading into a dishwasher or not, or maybe you're towel drying, and your mind can wander. And when your mind wanders, then those are the times when you can bring in the wisdom from the divine. You can receive the inspiration. You can have that connection that when your thinking brain is taking over, it kind of creates this like barrier between you and the divine. So let's see. Nancy's working right now on her artistry. Oh, thank you, Lily. Oh, you are very welcome. So the cool thing is we all know how to write. We can allow the words to flow. We can do it in that particular way. We can do it through artwork. We can do it through inspiration. We can actually do also meditative walks, exercise, so connection through movement. And in the movement, there are many people who probably had this happen where, you're doing yoga or you're stretching or you're taking a walk in nature or on the beach and, just things are starting to come through you. It's because you're moving without worrying about anything else. And we don't have to think as we're stepping step by step. If you're in pain and you've got to think about every step and how you place your foot, you're not going to be in a meditative state when you walk. But we've all been in this place where we're either driving our car or we're walking, like even just like walking down the mall, and we get off on a tangent in our brain, and then all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, where am I? Where was I going? Right? It's those moments where we were more in flow, in certain ways, or we got distracted in the future, or we got distracted in the past, right? So when we use meditation in movement, it's more focused intent. So we're trying to see as much as we can see. We're trying to smell as much as we can smell, feel. We're trying to use all of our senses with our intuition at the same time. And focusing a lot on our breath and staying grounded, really. So you kind of walk and stretch and just allow things like what catches your eye. When I was teaching this weekend, I was explaining to the students that, we were in this particular vibration for the weekend. It was pretty hot and intense. That to pay attention to anything that sticks out, that grasps your attention, that calls your focus and says, look at me. And, and what happened when we talked about that? We had this amazing experience with this cat coming on the deck at Star Nations. And it not only came on the deck, it sat, it was looking, I had eye contact with it. It, lifted its paw up to me. But because everybody had a different angle of seeing, we all saw a different cat in a way. Actually, we did. We all saw a different cat. And then people had, saw birds, or they saw squirrels, or they saw things. And as that stuck out to them, and as they, looked up, in the books, what did that mean from the animal totem? And it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm going through. Nature can speak to us if we listen, right? And it has a lot to share with us. And one of the things that, comes through in subtle communication is that we dismiss it. And that is one of the things that, the divine kind of wanted me to talk to you about, is how much communication you're getting all the time. But when you don't dedicate time to listen, then you can't hear, right? So if somebody's talking to you and you're doing your work and you're, you're on your computer and you're doing your work and your focus is on your work and they're talking to you, how much of that conversation do you really hold? Because you're not giving them all of your focus, right? And the biggest thing that is stopping us energetically on the planet right now really is this sense of this miscommunication. Because if we're not listening to our own internal guidance system and what it's saying, how well can we listen to other people? And you've been around some spiritual masters, you've seen them, or you've seen them in different states, or you have people who you see as a mentor in your life and all of that. So when you see those people, one of the things is that you admire about them is that they see you, they hear you, they listen to you, and they value your input, right? And it gives us this sensation of being important or mattering. It can have that feeling. The reality is that that's what we're seeking within us. We're seeking that communication with the divine where it feels one-on-one. And when we have that experience of, we can have a conversation when we want to have a conversation. And can you imagine actually being friends? You've got the spiritual team. They can be your friends that you hang out with, right? Hey guys, let's go here and let's see what we can discover. What can you help me discover today? Give me some really cool messages that like a treasure hunt, and make a game of it. Your inner child will love playing with it. Your guides will love communicating with you that way. And you'll start to open, you'll start to expand the ability to receive energy from the divine. So let me just check in, because I know there are a lot of comments. Yes. So Roberta says, sorry, Bobby. I always go by your name. So Bobby's saying the zone of non-thought. Yes. Lose all track of hours in the linear. Yes. Thank you. It's Neil Donald Walsh. Okay. I think I did say that correctly. Not sure, but if anybody's interested, the first book I love a lot, the friendship with God and communion with God. Those two I refer to a lot. Because the friendship part is, do you feel worthy of being friends? So Christine is saying, if I'm stuck on what my next painting will be, I clean the house, etc. Cleaning gets me out of my head, and suddenly an idea pops in. That's exactly what I'm talking about. What gets you out of your head? House cleaning is great. And that's another thing. Like for my husband, it's mowing the lawn too. And my grandmother was definitely like washing clothes and, doing the dishes. For me, there is some cleaning, not so much cleaning for me, organizing though, big time. So like cleaning my closet in that way where it's like getting everything lined up and getting rid of things that I don't need anymore. I tend to do that at work and at home when my energy is stuck. Always start at home. Home is where the heart is, right? So I start in my home, and then if I'm still feeling kind of that, then I start organizing at work more, which usually is pretty organized, because when I'm channeling, I need to be able to go on automatic pilot to where something is. I can't look for it because then it throws me out of what I'm doing. So in that kind of channel mode, and I'm sure this is true of you, Christine, your paints and your brushes are in particular places, as much as you can have like, 3 different canvases going. If you've got more than one idea going, but exactly, you don't have to hunt for your supplies, right where they are, or you fall out of the flow. So how are you not listening to the divine? Because that is another piece of the communication. Because the communication is a two-way street. Are you asking questions, or are you just assuming that out of all the millions of thoughts that you have in your head, the divine knows which one's most important to you, right? So what we think is most important may not be what the divine sees as the most important, because the divine is focused on our soul's growth and our soul's evolution. We may be focused on, paying our electric bill, right? But in terms of soul growth, that doesn't have a whole lot to do with it. So if you're not asking for what you need, how is the divine supposed to know that that is like your biggest stressor? So it's just like people. So when you are in relationships where you're having trouble with communication, that is a mirror for how well you are communicating with you, your higher self, your spiritual team, the divine. If you're having trouble with other people, you're also having trouble in that respect. And I tend to get a lot of resistance here. But it's how energy is flowing the same for all things. So if you have restricted flow, you're restricted in every single thing. Now, you may be able to take that restricted flow and pop it to its fullest potential with your artwork. And then the next thing you know, you're fully drained because you gave all your energy to this one thing. So it's that communication, the flow between you and other people, you and the divine. And, if things aren't going well in your relationships, that's exactly your communication with the divine. So I had this aha moment. Well, I had a whole bunch of them, but I had this one aha moment this weekend that all of my inner child things that were coming up, I had some really old fear that I didn't realize was still there. It came to the surface for me to clear it, which was so perfect. I'm so thankful that happened. And in that place of fear, I wasn't trusting the divine to be there for me. And that old energy of not trusting was like this ripple wave through all. It then showed me all these other, that basic not trust, like where it showed up in all these different ways in my life through until now. So from this one moment of childhood disconnect, it went all the way through till now. And I've noticed that before with different things. Shift, the work that I do, you go to the root of where the way I teach, you're healing energy at the root. I'm not looking to, heal the symptom. I'm looking to heal you at the cause, right? I'm not treating the symptom. I'm treating what caused it. And in that space, you are going to a place, as old as you can remember. And when I felt that disconnect with the divine, that moment of, the childhood innocence when we trust all and everything, and that 1 minute where that trust got broken. And whether that happened, you can actually feel the connection that it happened with the divine, or it happened with your parents, who, when you were incarnated, you saw them as divine, because we're all divine beings. So your parents were like God and goddess for you. And so as soon as there came times where you were being judged, in that moment, you disconnected a little bit from your version of the divine. And they're really subtle strands that I'm talking about. So part of this is, how can you open your communication? How can you get back to a place of childhood remembrance where you were just chatting with your imaginary friend all the time, right? So whether you do it through automatic writing, whether you do it through brain dumping, and whether you do that, it doesn't really matter. It's all it matters is that you take the time to expand your connection. And that should be our daily practice. Our daily practice should be, how do I open up communication with the divine every day? And some of you, that's going to be praying, but remember, when you're praying and you're asking, to stop and listen. Because don't tell somebody what to do and then walk away, right? Give them an opportunity to speak back. And that's really, really so on tap. So Deb asked a beautiful question. I feel like I was born disconnected. Can that be true? Absolutely, that can be true, right? Because if we have energy that we're carrying from any of our past lives, we were disconnected in those past lives, or we wouldn't have incarnated, right? Some of us, don't remember any connection, or we were born, to a family where we had to be shut down the minute we popped out of the womb. We needed to protect ourselves from the energy that was there. So, in that cord cutting, there you went, right? So yes, it absolutely can happen that you were disconnected. You still had some sort of, we all have some sort of, we have a crown chakra. So we have a way for that to interact with the divine. And remember, we have the gateway to open and close that. So when we do things and have thoughts and phrases like, I doubt it, or that'll never happen, or this always happens, when we do that, we close the crown chakra. So, sometimes we're lucky and it just kind of does a little blip. And then other times it's like, raw, and it closes really with difficulty. You wouldn't be watching this show if your crown chakra didn't have the capacity to hold the information here. So welcome to the show. But yeah, we can be born disconnected, and that is absolutely something that can be true. And sometimes that's our core wound, right? Our core wound can be that sense of abandonment, and maybe yours was, abandonment from the divine, because that's where the root of abandonment finally goes. We felt abandoned by our parents. We felt abandoned by this. Well, the root of it is going to go back all the way back to the divine. And the resentment, the judgment, that goes back too. And that comes from a place, an ancient place, that when we believed and that God judges us for what we do. And there are people who still believe that because it is a third dimensional belief system. But basically for the past, 2000 years or more, that's a belief system that we've been trying to dismantle. That God doesn't judge us, but that God loves us unconditionally. And to love us unconditionally means there is no condition under which God wouldn't love us. So it's a tough one for a lot of people to wrap their head around. And there's some people very much in the forefront of our world right now who are shaking us at our root system to see which belief system we're still holding on to, and are we going to stand up for our beliefs? Are we going to hold on to that? And if we do, if you believe in a non-judgmental God, then, and we are divine, then how are we judging others? Because then we're staying, when we judge someone else and we resent someone else, then we're still holding on to this old energy of a God who judges us as good, bad, right, wrong. Heavy stuff. heavy content, heavy stuff. So this conversation, right? You can decide, how much of this was Polly Joe's ego and how much of it was coming through Polly Joe as the messenger. I know what my truth is. You will have your truth on that. And that's completely fine. It doesn't impact me at all. So, Deb is saying, thank you. Exactly how it feels. This lifetime is about finding connections and is such a struggle. Ugh, yes, it is. But I tell you, we had such a breathtaking weekend. Neshi and I doing the healing work. We've already scheduled the next one in October, and in Wisconsin. And I can't even, to excavate things for people to get to their core wound in 2 days and start to stitch it up. Start to instead of have that wound gaping wide open, start stitching it up, start healing it. And even when we heal it up, if it's still scarred, if it still hurts when we touch it, it's like the more opportunities you have to do deep work like that, it's just amazing. And I'm so glad that's what we had the opportunity to do this past weekend. And I'll be back at Star Nations in October for another 3-day weekend. And we're already looking at dates for Neshi to come out to the East Coast for us to do it again next May, because our work together on this is deep, quick, and awakening. I think it such a privilege. So Nathan is saying, great to hear that is what I believe. Yes, great. I'm glad that works for you. And Bobby's saying, continuation of the weekend energy. Yes. Yes, there was a little stern healing energy that was coming through. So what we're going to do now, we have like about 10 minutes left, and normally I do a clearing and a meditation, and we aren't going to quite do that, but we're going to just take a couple deep breaths and we're going to check in. to our heart's connection, our high heart's connection to us, and our crown, in terms of our energy centers. Because those three are where we experience the energy flow coming in. And then they pop to our third eye, to our intuitive space. But we're just going to check into those energy centers and see if we can breathe a little expansion into them so that there's room for you to open and expand your communication with the divine, however you want to do that, and make up a new way. I'd be excited to hear some new ways to do that too. Okay? So you're going to hear me make clearing noises, and that's just, those noises are moving the energy of the entire group at a rapid pace, and sometimes it's faster than my energy system can ground at the moment. So let's take a couple of deep breaths. And maybe as we're taking in the deep breath, just imagine divine love and light and healing coming in as we breathe in. And just blowing out with this fine mist any negative, stuck energy that doesn't serve us. And try it again, breathing in the divine. And breathing out the stuck, denser energy. Once more, breathing in the divine. And breathing out the dense, stuck energy. And now we're going to check in with our sacred heart, our high heart or transcendental heart. That's on the top of our sternum. It's above our heart chakra energy. It's where we are connected to our highest self and ourself at the same moment. And we're just going to ask if there are any ways that we can expand our communication with the divine and how it connects to our highest heart. Are any ways that we can recognize this communication more clearly? Now we're going to ask the same question of our heart. So our beautiful heart chakra, that green energy, we're going to ask our heart, is there any way that we can help open and expand communication between our heart and the high heart, or communication with the divine directly to our heart? And breathing in space and opening and awareness so that we can sense it in one of our senses or our intuition. And we can have more clarity on the communication that our heart receives with us, for us, and through us. Now let's actually tap into our sixth chakra in our forehead. And notice how it communicates with our heart and our high heart and the divine. And are there any ways that we can expand our communication or make room for more clarity in the communication that we're receiving? And just breathing in some love and light and some possibility for that to occur. And maybe in some new and magical ways.
Yeah.
And now connecting to our crown chakra. And feeling its connection to our intuition, our sixth chakra. Feeling its communication with our heart. Feeling its communication with our high heart. And asking if there are ways that we could expand or open or awaken even more communication with the divine through our sixth and seventh chakras together, or our seventh chakra on its own, or with our hearts.
Yeah.
And with the communication open in all these places, we're just going to tap into how can all of these fuller and brighter vibrations communicate more clearly with ourselves, connecting into the third chakra. And how can they communicate? And is there energy here that can release? Now take a moment to just experience this expanded connection. And just breathe it into your whole body, to all the nooks and crannies. And you can gently begin to dissolve your meditation, your connection.
Yeah.
There's no need to ground and release. It's just opening. It's opening windows and doors. You know, springtime, we fling up in the windows and we let the fresh air in. That's what we're doing energetically. We're letting that fresh air kind of come in and allow our temple, our house to feel that breeze coming through, and the staleness, the stiffness, the stuffiness, all kind of moving through and out.
Got it.
So I hope that was helpful for you. I hope it sparked some communications with the divine for yourself, or topics of conversation that you would like to have. And, you know, I just want to go back to, it'll take me a second because of how things are. All right, so I just wanted to share Neshi's thing. So my Awakening Your True Potential class at Star Nations Academy is October 11th through the 13th. And the registration link will be up on Star Nations Academy at starnations.org later this week. I know Julie and Neshi are going to work on that real quickly because the vibration is in motion for this class already. It is a very small, intimate class because of the space that we have. But it is one of those things that it can shift an amazing amount within you in a short period of time. And there's something about the expanded flow that's coming for me and for Neshi, that when we work together and hold that in the sacred space of the academy, it's allowing some beautiful deep diving into the realms of what is needed. So if this calls to you, kind of keep that on your radar. Look for it on my Chakra Sessions page because it'll be posted. You guys are so welcome for everything today. And, you can check in with me tomorrow night on Soul Connections at 7 p.m. I'll be doing a clearing meditation for everyone and using some beautiful cards to give you channeled messages. But understand that the channel is coming through, whether there's a card there or not. And if you're really still looking for ways to communicate, you can check out our other shows today. Neshi has the Spiritual Roundtable at 3 Eastern Time. She picks the cards of the day and sees what the divine says through the cards and what our interpretations are and how they resonate for ourselves for the energy of what's going on in and around us. And Communications from Home is also at 8 p.m. tonight. And there's always something juicy and spiritually uplifting that happens when we communicate through Star Nations, through the divine. And Neshi brings that all together in her show on Tuesday nights. And with that, you guys, I hope you have a blessed rest of your regular week. And I will see you next week here on Chakra Sessions, Tuesdays at noon. Mwah. Have a great one.